Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're talking about this news right here. Netflix has canceled Marvel's Luke Cage. Now this is only about a week removed from Iron Fist being canceled on Netflix as well, and that one was one where people were a little surprised because it was the first time a Marvel show has ever been canceled on Netflix to this point. But at the same time, there are several critics out there of Iron Fist that were obviously not that surprised that it ended up happening. I personally was, because I thought Season 2 did a much better job than Season 1 did, and I overall did not hate the show. Is it the best show out there? No. Is it the best Marvel show out there? Absolutely not. But it was still entertaining. It was still a show that I could easily watch and easily get through every single episode. Unlike a couple of other shows that I had a little bit more of a struggle with, especially one that was damn near painful to get through, but I'm going to get to that in a second. But it all comes down to the fact that what we have here now is we have two Netflix shows that have gotten the boot, and it looks like it might be a continuing trend. There's some people out there who say, oh, this is just Disney trying to get back its properties, or is just trying to consolidate all of its intellectual properties, and that does make a little bit of sense. The only problem with that is the fact that Luke Cage has no place on the Disney streaming network. Based on what we've been told about what the streaming network is going to be, there's no place for any PG-13 or even R mature rating TV shows. It's going to be mostly family-oriented content, and there's nothing wrong with it being family-oriented content, but they need to at least understand that when it comes to their Marvel properties, especially when it comes to things like Luke Cage, there is an audience out there, there is a market out there for more of an adult-themed show. It's the reason why Daredevil has done so well. It's the reason why Luke Cage has done so well. It's the reason why even things like Iron Fist have done so well. There's one show though, and this is really the crux of everything that I want to talk about today. There's one show that to me, it makes no logical sense, other than it being, you know, an NPC SJW show, that it even exists to this point, and that is Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones season 1 was decent. It was okay. David Tennant was the one that made that season bearable because he had a pretty cool character. Kilgrave was a pretty menacing character, and of course it was played expertly by David Tennant. But everything else about that show has just been so off-putting and just bizarre and just not very good. It was one of those things where season 1 you're like, it was okay. I hope, you know, they have a lot of potential here. There are a lot of things that they could do with this show. There's a lot of things they could do with this character, and maybe they'll actually try to explore those things. But then season 2 came out, and season 2 of Jessica Jones was probably one of the worst television shows that I have ever seen. It was painful to get through each episode because each episode hits you over the head with a stupid political narrative every single time. And everything that came up before the show, because again, as I was watching the season, I decided to do some little research, on the actual show itself. And what I found out was, oh, wait a minute, they made it a point to only hire female directors, and I believe also female writers. I know that at least that they only hire female directors for the entire season. And I don't have anything wrong. I don't care what the gender or race of a person directing a show is, but when you go out of your way to, the NPCs aren't going to like this term, but to discriminate against an entire gender to try and push for some kind of narrative, I think there's already going to be some problems with that. And it showed. It showed that Jessica Jones cared more about pushing a political narrative, cared more about just pushing a social narrative than it did about actually creating a good show, which is the reason why that was one of the most difficult seasons that I could ever get through. In fact, I can't even remember what the season 2 was about, and I'm not even sure I even finished it because it was just getting so freaking annoying. The same things were happening, and it wasn't good. It wasn't entertaining. It was boring because instead of telling an awesome story about a kick-ass superhero, instead it was, oh, well, my name's Jessica Jones, and I'm a strong, independent woman, and I don't know. It was just like, no one wants to see that. That's just boring. Talk about Luke Cage now. Luke Cage is obviously the one that has just been canceled. I am not a huge Luke Cage fan. I respect it for what it is. I think that there's some really cool things this season, especially. Bushmaster was probably one of the coolest villains that they've had in a long time. I thought that the dynamic between those two was very good, but there's definitely some things in there that, let's just be honest, they were not made for me. Like, there were certain plot points, there were certain character arcs that were just not made for me, because this was, again, another show that had a political orientation for it, was trying to be made for a certain audience, and that is fine. However, in my overall critique of the season, if you go back and watch my video, I said, when you make a show like this, when it's a Marvel property on Netflix, you should have a show that has a more broad appeal. Again, this is a show where season 1 was, I felt like, for most people. Season 2 seemed like they were trying to go more for a niche type audience, and I think that that was a bit of a mistake, because were there some really cool things in it? Absolutely, which was the reason why I was able to get through the show, get through the season, and actually thoroughly enjoy myself for the most part. It was very fun, but it was not like a Daredevil. Daredevil, to me, is a show that anyone can watch. There is a character in there for every person. There is a character arc and story arc that every person can be attached to. You know, Luke Cage had some of that, had some characters that you could attach to, and that's the main reason why the show is bearable to watch through. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to be blind in that case not to see, oh, yeah, they're obviously trying to hit a certain market here, and that's just being honest, because that's what they were trying to do. And guess what? It worked for them. It was a very successful show. I mean, Netflix is never going to release its numbers, but everything I know about the show, based on people I've talked to, based on critic ratings, it was a very successful show. And that's the reason why for this, I just do not understand it, because it makes no sense to me. If Disney already has pretty much made the case that it's not going to be putting PG-13 or mostly rated R mature shows like Luke Cage on their network, why would they pull the plug? Which is the reason why I think that there's something else going on behind the scenes here, because it makes no sense for Disney to cut ties with Netflix. It's a very lucrative deal, and it's actually doing pretty well for them overall. And based on everything I've heard about Luke Cage, as far as how it was received and the ratings go, this is a hit show right here. This is a show that's doing very well. I would say that next to when you, so I'm sorry, I honestly, I cannot believe that this is happening. But next to Daredevil, this is definitely probably the second most successful show. And it makes sense, because Daredevil was the first show that did it, has more of that broad appeal, is not made for a certain niche audience compared to Luke Cage. But even then, the fact that Luke Cage is made for a certain audience and yet is able to be enjoyed by several different types of people, that's an incredible feat. This is a very good show, and yet it got canceled. But then you got Jessica Jones, which is a garbage show, which is a garbage tier show, and yet somehow that show is continuing on, except somehow, oh, that show gets a season 3. That show gets to continue on, and also it all plays into the political narrative. It all makes sense. And of course, the show about a strong, independent woman that only hires female directors, of course, that is the show that's going to continue, because if that show got canceled, oh boy, there would have been, backlash. And it's interesting because Luke Cage would have been that show maybe about 10 years ago. If Luke Cage had existed in a different time period, guess what? That would be the show that would be untouchable. But it's interesting now that this show has been given the boot, and yet Jessica Jones continues on. And we know that if it really is Disney trying to grab back its intellectual property, which it very well could be at this point, if that's going on, well then after season 2 of Punisher comes out, it's going to get canceled. Which means that and then Daredevil season 3 has already come out, is doing very well. I'm already 3 episodes in. This show is awesome. Guys, if you've not checked out Daredevil at all, watch season 1 and 2. They are some of the best television that you'll be seeing, especially from Marvel properties. They are so freaking good. It's definitely the best show, at least in my opinion, the best Marvel show on Netflix at this point to date. And I think season 3 just really does kind of, push the bar and raise the bar in so many different ways. But you know that if that's what's going on, if they're just taking back their properties, well then this show, that Daredevil's going to get the boot next, which means one thing. Guess what the last show to get the boot will be? Jessica Jones, and I don't think they would have it any other way. But guys, what do you think? Do you think that it's them trying to get their properties back? Because it just doesn't, again, it does not make any sense for them to do that. These are two, again, with Luke Cage and eventually with Daredevil, again, if that's what they're doing, very successful shows. Why is it that they would be trying to take those off Netflix when that's a lucrative deal, when they're not even going to put them on, Daredevil, you might have a spot for that because it's more, that one's definitely more of a PG-13 type show. Luke Cage is definitely edged on mature, and Luke Cage Disney-fied would just not work. There's really, unfortunately, no place for that kind of a show on the Disney streaming service because it does not, it goes a little past that PG-13 rating, and if you try to make a PG-13 PG version of Luke Cage, it's just not going to be the same. It's just not going to work. Daredevil could work. Daredevil could make that transition, but I don't know at this point. It just, again, going back to when Iron Fist got canceled. Iron Fist got canceled. You know what? Hey, makes a little bit of sense. Didn't do that well, was not that well received. Makes sense that would be a show that would get the axe. Luke Cage getting the axe doesn't make any sense. It just does not make any sense. Going back to the fact that even if they're getting their IPs back, it makes no sense for them to end this deal with Netflix. It makes none. to me, they'll make more money by keeping these shows in their current form on Netflix than either doing away with them altogether or trying to bring them back to the Disney streaming service. But we might have a little bit more behind the scenes because, again, the mindset right now is, oh, this is just Disney trying to acquire its IPs back, trying to get Netflix out of the deal because eventually, next year they're going to be opening up their own streaming service. But the reason why this might not be the case is because there has now been a report that when you look at this story, right now the report is that there are creative differences. And so Deadline pointed to so it says right here, Deadline pointed to Marvel and Netflix's concrete efforts to develop a third season. They stood up a writer's room for a third season early this year, which were stymied by rising tensions in the past month over creative differences between Marvel and Netflix over the scripts that have been developed. So it definitely seems like that is probably the reason why. And I don't know if they decide just because they couldn't agree just to give up and just to save face and try and, bring the content back, but I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's going to end up biting them in the butt, to be honest, because they're losing a really strong audience for this show. They're losing a lot of people who love this show. Again, this was many people, some people even had it as their #1 show, but at the very least, people had, myself included, had this at their second favorite show on, the Marvel, on the Netflix Marvel show list. And now it's gone, and what do you have left? You have an amazing show in Daredevil. Again, check out season 3, guys. It's amazing. You then have season 2 of The Punisher, which looks good. Look, it's going to be awesome because Punisher season 1 was so badass. It was so great. And then you have Jessica Jones. Oh, yeah, we're going to make Jessica Jones season 3 because everyone wants to see that. No one wants to see that. Nobody wants to see that. There's a very small subsect of society that even cares about that show. Oh, we're hiring only women and only women writers and only women producers, et cetera, et cetera. And pretty soon everything is going to be women. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, now you've just isolated and alienated half of your audience. And now who's going to watch your show? Because even the women that you're making it for, a lot of them don't care and do not want to see the show. But that's just my thought, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me. I am still kind of in shock that this is happening to Iron Fist. Again, not Iron Fist, rather to Luke Cage. Again, it makes sense that Iron Fist would get the boot. It makes no sense in my mind. Even again, if you're going to make the IP argument, it still makes no sense that you would take a very successful show off Netflix and keep a show like Jessica Jones, which is arguably the weakest show on there. But that's my thought. Anyway, guys, have a great day, and as always, God bless.